Before we dive into today's story, and trust me, you might want to grab a glass of ice water because this one gets intense. Do me a huge favor. If you love possessive alphas and romance that keeps you on the edge of your seat, please smash that like button and hit subscribe. It helps the algorithm find more romance lovers like us. Also, I'm curious, where is my pack hiding today? Drop a comment below and tell me what city or country you're listening from. I love seeing how far our territory reaches. All right, are you ready? Let's get into it. I was supposed to be a ghost, born without a scent, invisible to the senses. I was the Silver Mist Pack's perfect spy. My brother, Alpha Tauren, sent me into the enemy's fortress with one rule: don't get caught. But biology doesn't care about politics. In the middle of the War Council, my suppressants failed. My body betrayed me. The scent of wild honey and desperate need exploded through the room, turning every soldier into a predator. I ran. I ran blindly, seeking safety, seeking a place to hide. I thought I found sanctuary in the high tower. I was wrong. I had run straight into the lion's den. King Riker stood between me and the door. The enemy, Alpha. The man I was sent to destroy. I tried to use my rank as a shield. I backed against the wall, trembling, fighting the heat consuming my blood. "Stay back," I screamed. "I am the sister of Alpha Tauren. If you touch me, it means war. He will burn this kingdom to ash." Riker didn't call the guards. He didn't draw his sword. He just inhaled. His eyes turned pitch black. He walked toward me, unbuttoning his cuffs, looking at me not like a prisoner, but like a starving man looks at a feast. "War?" he growled, his voice vibrating against my very soul. "Let them come. Let the world burn." He pinned me against the door. "Tonight, you are mine." Chapter 1. The Ghost and the Brother. In a world governed by primal senses, to be scentless is to be invisible. I was Nyla, the ghost wolf. To my pack, the Silver Mist, I wasn't just a genetic anomaly. I was a void in the air where a person should be. I couldn't mind link. I couldn't project an aura. I was 21 years old, and I had never felt the comforting brush of another wolf's spirit against my own. I was the alpha sister, yet I existed less than the lowest omega. Eat. My brother, Alpha Tauren, pushed a chipped ceramic plate across his desk toward me. On it sat a single bruised apple and a heel of stale bread. I looked at the food, then up at him. Tauren was only 25, but today he looked 50. The invisible weight of the Alpha crown sat heavy on his brow, carving deep lines of stress into his face. His uniform hung loosely on his frame. He had lost 20 pounds in the last month alone. "I'm not hungry," I lied softly, though my stomach cramped violently at the sweet smell of the apple. "You eat it, Tauren. You need the strength to lead." "I cannot lead a graveyard, Nyla," he snapped, his voice cracking mid-sentence. He rubbed his face with shaking hands, the sound of his rough skin against his palms filling the silent womb. "The granaries are empty. The deer have moved south to the Crimson Rock lands. I heard a mother in the village mixing sawdust into her children's porridge this morning just to fill their bellies. Sawdust!" He stood up and walked to the window, turning his back to me. His broad shoulders were trembling. "We are dying," he whispered to the glass, "and I am failing." I stood up and walked to him, placing a hesitant hand on his back. He flinched, not out of cruelty, but out of sheer, raw exhaustion. "What can I do?" I asked, the familiar ache of uselessness swelling in my chest like a bruise. "I can't hunt. I can't fight. I'm just a ghost." Tauren turned around. His eyes were red-rimmed and desperate. He looked at me not as his little sister, but as a drowning man looks at a piece of driftwood. That is exactly why I need you, he choked out. You are the only one who can walk through walls. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet pouch. He opened it to reveal a black glass vial filled with a thick, inky liquid. Kane Riker, Torin said the name with a mixture of hatred and paralyzing fear. He sits in his Crimson Rock stronghold, feasting while we rot. He has the map of the hidden routes, the secret supply lines that bypass the mountains. If we had that map, we could trade with the coast, we could buy grain, we could save Zola. The name of our youngest sister hung in the air like smoke. Zola was 12, bedridden upstairs with a wasting sickness that required medicine we could no longer afford. Even now, I could hear the faint rattling sound of her cough echoing through the floorboards, a constant metronome counting down our time. I want you to steal from the Alpha King, I whispered, a cold sweat breaking out on the back of my neck. Torin, that is a death sentence. He is a monster. They say he tears spies apart with his bare hands. I know. Torin grabbed my shoulders, his grip bruising. Tears finally spilled down his cheeks, hot and angry. Do you think I want this? Do you think I want to send my sister into the dark? But I have to choose, Nyla. I have to choose between risking you or watching Zola die in agony. He pressed the cold vial into my palm. These are suppressants, he explained hurriedly, his voice frantic. They will force your biology into a deep sleep. No fear scent, no heat, no heartbeat spikes. You will be completely undetectable, a true ghost. I looked at the vial. The liquid swirled sluggishly, looking like poison. If I do this, I asked, my voice trembling, will I finally be useful? Will I finally be part of this pack? Torin pulled me into a fierce embrace, burying his face in my neck. He smelled of dust and despair. You are the only hope we have left, he sobbed into my hair. Please, Nyla, be the weapon I need, just this once. I closed my fingers around the cold glass vial. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the broken girl in the corner. I was the lifeline. I'll go, I whispered. I didn't know then that the suppressants came with a price. I didn't know that by forcing my wolf into a coma, I was only building a dam against a tidal wave. And when that dam finally broke inside the enemy K's castle, it wouldn't be a leak, it would be a flood. Chapter 2. The Lion's Den. The Crimson Rock stronghold didn't look like a castle. It looked like a threat carved into the living mountain. I kept my head down, clutching a heavy silver tray of wine decanters against my chest as I navigated the labyrinthine stone corridors. The disguise Torin had arranged was perfect. A simple gray servant's tunic, rough against my skin, identical to the hundreds of others bustling through the fortress. But the disguise didn't stop the nausea. The suppressants I had swallowed were doing their job too well. They hadn't just masked my scent, they had numbed my soul. I felt like I was moving underwater. My heartbeat was a slow, artificial thud in my ears, and my skin felt cold and rubbery, as if my body was slowly shutting down to protect the secret within. The sensory difference between my starving home and this place was violent. The Silver Mist lands smelled of frost, dry earth, and desperation. Here, the air was thick with the scent of roasting venison, warm bread, and the aggressive, metallic tang of an army at peak strength. It was the smell of conquerors. It made my mouth water and my stomach rebel simultaneously. Focus, I told myself, tightening my grip on the tray until my knuckles turned white. Find the war room, pour the wine, memorize the map, get out. I reached the heavy double doors of the council chamber. 2 guards stood sentinel, their armor gleaming under the torchlight. They were massive, their eyes scanning the hallway with bored lethality. I held my breath, a habit I couldn't break, and walked past them. The suppressants held. To the guards, I was nothing more than a shadow, a piece of furniture moving wine from one room to another. They didn't even blink. I pushed into the war room. It was a cavernous space dominated by a massive table carved from a single slab of red granite. Maps were sprawled across its surface, maps that could save Zala's life, maps that showed where the grain wagons traveled. But I couldn't look at the maps. I couldn't look at anything except the man standing at the head of the table. King Riker. He was terrifying. He stood with his back to me, looking out a high window, but his sheer size sucked the oxygen out of the room. He wore a black military coat that strained against the width of his shoulders. Even from across the room, I could feel the radiation of his alpha power. It was a heavy static pressure that made the fine hairs on my arms stand up. I moved to the sideboard, my hands trembling as I set down the tray. I needed to be invisible. I needed to be a ghost. But as I uncorked the wine, Riker turned around. I froze. His face was a landscape of brutal masculine beauty, sharp jaw, heavy brows, and eyes the color of burning amber. But it wasn't his looks that made my knees weak. It was a scent. Even from across the room, it hit me. Cedar, rain, and fresh blood. It was the most potent, overwhelming scent I had ever encountered. It didn't just smell good, it smelled necessary. Deep inside me, beneath the chemical coma of the suppressants, something stirred. Thump. My heart skipped a beat. It wasn't the slow, drugged rhythm anymore. It was a frantic, erratic kick. A wave of heat flushed through my body, sudden and violent, like a fever breaking. I gasped, gripping the edge of the table to keep from falling. The suppressants were fighting the biological reaction to a true alpha, and the war was happening inside my veins. "You!" a sharp voice barked from the doorway. I spun around, nearly knocking over a goblet. General Caiello, Riker's second in command, strode into the room. He was a lean, scarred wolf with eyes like flint. He walked straight up to me, invading my personal space. He sniffed the air loudly. "You're shaken, girl," Caiello accused, his eyes narrowing. "And you smell sterile, like chemicals." My throat closed up. The suppressants were failing. They were supposed to make me smell like nothing, but under the stress of the king's presence, they were smelling like wrongness. I am recovering from a fever, General," I lied, my voice breathless and higher than usual. Caiello leaned in closer, his nose inches from my neck. He was hunting for a lie. The King Riker watched from the window. He hadn't moved, but his amber eyes were locked onto me now. He tilted his head, studying the trembling servant girl with a look of intense predatory curiosity. I felt a bead of sweat roll down my spine. The heat in my body was rising. It wasn't just a fever. It was an ache, a deep, heavy throb in my lower belly that terrified me more than the general's sword. My body wasn't just waking up. It was screaming. Chapter 3. The Scent of Betrayal. "Leave her, Caiello." The command rolled across the room like a crack of thunder. King Riker had spoken. General Caiello stiffened, his nose still hovering inches from my neck. He glared at me with suspicion one last time before stepping back, bowing stiffly to his king. "He smells off, my king," Caiello grumbled, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. "Like a concealed weapon." "She smells like fear," Riker corrected, his voice a low, vibrating baritone that I felt in the soles of my feet. "And you are frightening the help. Sit down." Caiello retreated to the table, but his eyes never left me. I tried to move. I tried to pick up the wine decanter and pour for the council members, but my hands were no longer obeying my brain. The tremors had moved from my hands to my core. A sheen of sweat slicked my skin, making the rough wool of my tunic itch unbearably. "Get out," my mind screamed. "Run now." But my body was rooted to the spot. Riker was staring at me. His amber eyes were stripping me bare, peeling back the layers of my disguise, not with logic, but with instinct. He knew. He didn't know what I was, but his wolf knew I was something significant. I took a step toward the door, and then the dam broke. It didn't start with a scent. It started with a pain, a sharp, cramping twist in my lower abdomen that forced a gasp from my lips. It felt like a hook had snagged my insides and yanked. The suppressants dissolved. The chemical wall Torin had built around my biology shattered under the pressure of the king's proximity. The heat hit me not as a wave, but as an explosion. My vision blurred, my knees buckled, and I crashed to the stone floor. The silver tray clattered loud, wine spilling like blood across the gray stones. "Girl?" Gaiello barked, half rising from his chair. Then the scent hit them. It wasn't the sterile smell of chemicals anymore. It was thick, cloying, and undeniable. It was the scent of wild honey, heated spice, and desperate biological need. It was the scent of an omega in peak, unbridled heat. The silence that fell over the war room was deafening. Every head snapped toward me. The guards at the door went rigid, their pupils dilating until their eyes were black pools. The council members gripped the edge of the table, their knuckles white, fighting the sudden violent urge to pounce. "An omega," Gaiello breathed, his voice sounding strangled. "In the war room?" But I wasn't looking at them. I was looking at Riker. The king stood up. He moved so fast, his heavy oak chair flew backward and smashed against the wall. He didn't look angry. He looked possessed. His nostrils flared, drawing in the air that was now saturated with my essence. The amber in his eyes was swallowed by a pitch-black void. The veins in his neck bulged as he fought for control, his hands gripping the edge of the granite table so hard that the stone cracked with a sharp pop. "Mine," a voice whispered in my head. I didn't know if he had spoken it aloud or if his wolf had projected it directly into my mind, but the word vibrated through my bones. Panic. Cold and sharp pierced through the haze of lust clouding my brain. I was a spy. I was the enemy. And I had just turned into a beacon for every unmated male in the fortress. "Seize her!" Gaiello shouted, drawing his sword, though his hand shook with the effort to resist the pheromones. I scrambled backwards, on my hands and knees, slipping in the spilled wine. Run! I forced my body to move. I scrambled to my feet, my legs feeling like jelly, and bolted for the service door. "Stop!" Riker roared. The sound wasn't human. It was a command that shook the dust from the rafters. I didn't stop. I burst into the hallway, tears streaming down my face, my body burning, my heart screaming. I ran blindly, not knowing where I was going, only knowing that I had to get away from the monsters I had just awakened. Behind me, I heard the crash of furniture and the heavy, predatory thud of boots giving chase. The hunt had begun. Chapter 4. The Hunt. I didn't run like a spy. I ran like prey. The stone corridors of the Crimson Rock stronghold flew past in a blur of gray and torchlight. My breath tore at my throat, ragged and hot. Every step was a battle against my own biology. My legs felt heavy, turning to liquid under the overwhelming command of the heat. My body didn't want to run. It wanted to drop, to bare my neck, to surrender to the alpha power radiating from the room I had just fled. "Move!" I screamed internally. "Think of Zola. Think of Torin." Behind me, the heavy wooden doors of the war room slammed open against the stone walls. Then came the sounds. Not the disciplined march of soldiers, but the chaotic, heavy thudding of boots breaking into a run. Snarls, low, guttural sounds of hunger that echoed off the vaulted ceilings. "Find her!" General Kylo's voice bellowed through the din. "Seal the exits! Don't let the Omega leave the keep!" I skidded around a corner, my shoulder slamming painfully into the rough stone. I whimpered, the sound shocking me. It wasn't a word, it was a soft, kneading noise that my throat produced without my permission. The hallway ahead was blocked. 2 guards stood at the intersection. At the side of me, disheveled, sweating, smelling of wild honey and distress, they didn't draw their weapons. They froze, their nostrils flared, taking in the scent cloud I was trailing, their eyes glazed over, shifting from human to wolf. They took a step toward me, not to arrest me, but to claim. I shrieked and spinning on my heel and bolting toward the narrow servants' staircase. I scrambled up the steps on my hands and knees, my fingers slipping on the stone. The heat inside me was becoming unbearable. It was a fever that consumed everything: logic, fear, duty. My skin felt like it was on fire. My blood pounded a frantic rhythm. Mate, mate, mate. I reached the landing of the upper tower. I didn't know where I was. I only knew I needed a door. I needed a lock. I needed to hide my scent before the entire army tore the castle apart to find me. There was only one door at the end of the hall. It was massive, made of dark oak, carved with scenes of wolves hunting stags. I didn't hesitate. I threw my weight against it. It gave way. I stumbled inside, slamming the heavy wood shut behind me. My hands shook violently as I fumbled with the iron deadbolt, sliding it home with a loud clang. I collapsed against the door, sliding down until I hit the floor. I hugged my knees to my chest, sobbing. The tears were hot and humiliating. I had failed. I was trapped in the enemy stronghold. My body was turning against me, and outside this door, a pack of feral wolves was hunting me down. Safe, safe, I whispered, rocking back and forth. I just need to wait it out. Just wait. But as my breathing slowed, my senses began to return. I inhaled. The air in this room didn't smell like the rest of the castle. It didn't smell of torches or unwashed soldiers. It smelled of cedar, dark rain, and fresh blood. My heart stopped. I knew that scent. It was the scent that had triggered the heat. It was the scent of the man in the war room. I slowly lifted my head. This wasn't a guest room. It was vast, dominated by a massive bed draped in black furs. Weapons hung on the walls. A balcony door stood open, letting in the night breeze. I hadn't found safety. I had run straight into the king's private chambers. And then from the shadows of the balcony, a figure stepped into the moonlight. "You have a terrible sense of direction, little spy," a deep voice rumbled. King Riker stood there. He wasn't chasing me. He was waiting for me. Chapter 5. The Trap. My heart didn't just stop. It plummeted into my stomach. King Riker stepped fully into the light. He had shed his heavy military coat, leaving him in a black linen shirt unbuttoned at the throat. His chest heaved with slow, deep breaths, his eyes fixed on me with a terrifying intensity. I backed up until my spine hit the heavy oak door I had just locked. I could hear the shouting of the guards on the stairs outside, muffled, chaotic, getting closer. "How?" I whispered, my voice trembling. I ran faster than anyone. "This is my castle," Riker said simply. He took a step toward me. I know the shortcuts. And I knew exactly where a frightened little rabbit would run. He didn't look angry about the infiltration. He looked hungry. The amber in his eyes was gone, entirely consumed by the void of his pupil. He was deep in his alpha instincts, fighting the same biological command that was currently melting my insides. He walked past me, calm as a storm cloud, and placed his large hand over the iron deadbolt I had just engaged. Click. He twisted the secondary lock, a heavy mechanism I had never even noticed. "You locked them out," he murmured, his voice vibrating in the small space between us. "But you locked yourself in." I flinched as he turned back to me. The heat radiating off him was a physical weight. It mixed with the fever in my blood, creating a dizzying, suffocating pressure. "Stay back," I gasped, holding up a shaking hand. I tried to summon the cold political mask I had worn my entire life. I tried to be the diplomat. "I know who you are now. You smelled the truth. Raker stopped inches from me. He didn't touch me yet. He just inhaled, letting my distress and arousal fill his lungs. I know what you are, he agreed. I am Nyla of the Silver Mist. I am the sister of Alpha Tauren. If you touch me, if you harm me, you will burn these lands to the ground. You will start a war that will destroy both our packs. It was a bluff. Tauren was starving. He didn't have the soldiers to fight Riker, but it was the only shield I had left. Raker laughed. It was a dark, low sound that sent a shiver straight to my core. War? He growled, stepping into my personal space. He reached out and wrapped his hand around my wrist, pinning it to the wood of the door beside my head. His grip was iron, inescapable. He pulled my wrist, spinning me around and pinning my chest against the door. I gasped at his heavy body pressed against my back, trapping me completely. I was surrounded by him, his scent, his heat, his power. You aren't a diplomat tonight, he growled against my neck, his teeth grazing the sensitive skin over my pulse. Tonight, you are mine. Chapter 6. The Surrender. The world narrowed down to the sensation of Riker's body pressing against mine. I tried to push him away. I really did. My hands flattened against the hard muscle of his chest. But instead of shoving, my fingers curled into his shirt. The heat radiating from him was intoxicating. It was the only thing that made sense in the fever consuming my brain. Fight me, Riker challenged, his voice a ragged whisper against my skin. He grabbed my hips, pulling me flush against him so I could feel exactly how much he wanted me. Tell me to stop. Tell me you don't want this. I can't, I gasped. It's the heat. It's not real. It is the only thing that is real, he growled. He kissed the sensitive spot beneath my ear, and a jolt of pleasure so intense it was painful shot through my spine. My knees gave out. Riker caught me easily, one arm wrapping around my waist to hold me up against the door. The logic of my mission evaporated. Zola, Tauren, the maps, they felt like distant memories from another life. In this moment, there was only the ache, an emptiness that demanded to be filled, and the only thing that could fill it was the enemy holding me. Please, I whimpered. I didn't even know what I was begging for. Release? Mercy? Him? Riker pulled back just enough to look at me. His pupils were blown so wide, his eyes were almost black. He looked at me with a possessive, terrifying hunger. Say it, he commanded. Riker? Say you're mine, he demanded, his hand moving to my throat, holding me in place. Admit it, Nyla. Your brother gave you up. You belong to me now. A tear slipped down my cheek. It was true. Tauren had sent me here knowing the risks. He had gambled me, and he had lost. I'm yours, I whispered, the words tasting like surrender. Riker didn't smile. He looked relieved. He looked like a man who had been starving for a century and had finally found a feast. He kissed me. It wasn't gentle. It was acclaiming. He devoured my mouth, his tongue tasting the wine and fear on my lips. It was rough, desperate, and perfect. I moaned into his mouth, wrapping my arms around his neck, pulling him closer, needing him closer. He swept me up into his arms, carrying me toward the massive black bed, not as a prisoner, but as a prize. No more running, he murmured as he laid me down on the furs. He loomed over me, blocking out the moonlight, blocking out the world. Tonight, I rewrite your loyalty. He ripped his shirt open, buttons scattering across the floor.
Tonight, he vowed, I ruin you for anyone else.
Chapter 7. The Mating. The furs beneath me were soft, but the man settling between my thighs was hard as iron and radiating a heat that threatened to burn me alive. Riker didn't rush. He loomed over me, his massive shoulders blocking out the moonlight, his eyes pitch black with a hunger that had snapped the leash of his control. He used his knee to nudge my legs further apart, opening me completely to him. The cool air hit my heated, slick skin, only to be replaced by the scorching warmth of his body pressing close. "Look at you," he growled, his voice a rough vibration that I felt in my very bones. His large, calloused hand slid up my thigh, his thumb brushing the sensitive, aching center of my knee. I gasped, my hips bucking off the mattress involuntarily. So wet, so desperate for me. "Please," I sobbed, my hands scrabbling for purchase on his biceps. The heat was a physical pain now, a hollow ache that demanded to be filled. "Riker, please, now!" "I'm going to fill you, Nyla," he promised darkly. "I'm going to make sure you never forget who owns you." He lined himself up, the blunt, heavy pressure of him against my entrance, making my breath hitch. He didn't thrust, he sank into me. It was a slow, stretching invasion, a feeling of being completely and utterly occupied. He was huge, stretching me beyond what I thought possible, but my body, slick with the heat, welcomed him, closing around him tight. I cried out a sound that was half pain, half ecstasy as he seated himself to the hilt. Riker groaned, his head falling back, the cords of his neck straining. "So tight," he rasped. "You feel perfect." He held still for a moment, letting us both adjust to the fullness, letting the biological shock wave of our union crash through us. Then he began to move. It started as a slow, grinding friction. He withdrew almost completely, then drove back in with a long, smooth stroke that hit a spot deep inside me, sending sparks behind my eyelids. The rhythm was ancient and demanding. The sound of skin slapping against skin, the creak of the heavy bed frame, and our ragged breathing filled the room. I wrapped my legs around his waist, pulling him deeper, needing more friction, more weight. The pleasure was building, a tight coil in my belly, winding tighter and tighter with every thrust. "That's it," Riker encouraged, his voice ragged. He picked up the pace, his movements becoming harder, more possessive. He drove into me with a relentless, punishing rhythm until I was sobbing his name, my head tossing back and forth on the furs. The pleasure was blinding, a white-hot tide rising higher and higher. "Look at me," he roared. I forced my eyes open. He was staring down at me, sweat dripping from his brow, his face twisted in primal pleasure. "The bond," he gasped, his hips snapping forward, hitting deep. "Feel it?" I felt it. As the tension peaked, the golden thread between our souls pulled taut. I was on the edge, teetering over the precipice. "Mark me," I screamed, the wolf inside me demanding the final claim. Riker didn't hesitate. As he drove into me one final, devastating time, he lowered his head and sank his fangs into the sensitive curve of my neck. The bite was a sharp, stinging shock that shattered me. My release hit instantly. I convulsed around him, my body clamping down, milking him as waves of blinding pleasure ripped through me. Riker roared my name, pouring himself into me, his own release shuddering through his massive frame. His venom flooded my veins at the same time, mixing with my blood, rewriting my soul, binding us together for eternity. We rode out the aftershocks together, trembling and slick with sweat, our heavy breathing the only sound in the room. He collapsed on top of me, careful not to crush me with his full weight, but staying buried deep inside, keeping the connection unbroken. He buried his face in my neck, licking the bite mark soothingly. "Mine," he breathed against my skin, the word stamping itself onto my heart. "Yours," I whispered back, drifting into the darkness of exhaustion, finally, perfectly complete. Chapter 8. The Morning After. I woke up to the smell of cedar, sex, and dark roast coffee. For a few blissful seconds, I floated in the warm, hazy space between sleep and wakefulness. My body felt heavy, sated, and fundamentally different. There was a hum in my blood, a low, golden resonance that hadn't been there yesterday. My skin tingled with a phantom warmth as if I were still wrapped in a fire. Then, memory crashed into me like a falling wall. The war room. The heat. The chase. The door. Him! I sat up abruptly, clutching the black silk sheets to my chest. The room was bathed in the unforgiving light of morning. My clothes, my gray servant's tunic, lay in shredded ribbons on the floor, a testament to the frenzy of the night. On the nightstand sat a silver tray with coffee, fruit, and warm bread. And on the velvet chair by the window sat King Riker. He was fully dressed in fresh military blacks, looking immaculate, terrifying, and utterly composed. He was watching me over the rim of a coffee cup, his amber eyes unreadable. I touched my neck instinctively. The skin was tender, raised, and throbbing. A mark. A mating mark. Oh God, I whispered, the horror setting in. The biological haze was gone, leaving only the cold, sharp reality. What have I done? You slept, Riker said calmly, setting his cup down. Soundly. I mated with the enemy, I choked out, swinging my legs over the side of the bed, but keeping the sheet wrapped tight. I betrayed my brother. I betrayed my pack. Torin sent me to save them, and I slept with the monster who was starving them. Riker stood up. I flinched, pulling back against the headboard, expecting anger or mockery. I expected the warlord. Instead, he walked over to the bed and sat on the edge, keeping a respectful distance. He reached into the inner pocket of his military jacket and pulled out a rolled parchment. He tossed it on the bed between us. I stared at it. It was old, the edges worn soft. Open it, he said. With trembling hands, I unrolled the scroll. It was a map, a detailed, intricate map of the mountain passes, marked with safe houses, water sources, and hidden trails that bypassed the Crimson Rock patrols. It was the map of the hidden routes, the very thing Torin had sent me to steal, the thing I had risked my life for. I looked up at Riker, confusion warring with fear. Why are you giving me this? Because your brother is starving, Riker said, his voice deep and devoid of malice, and because I knew he sent you. My blood ran cold. The map slipped from my fingers. You knew? I whispered, my voice rising in disbelief. Nyla, Riker sighed, running a hand through his dark hair. I have spies in Silver Mist, too. I knew Torin was desperate. I knew he was planning to send a ghost to infiltrate my council. I was waiting for you. You let me in? I whispered, my voice rising in disbelief. You let me serve wine? You let me run? I wanted to see who you were. I expected an assassin. I expected a warrior and I would have to kill. I didn't expect. His eyes softened, landing on the fresh mark on my neck. I didn't expect my soulmate. He reached out and tucked a strand of messy hair behind my ear. His touch was gentle, possessive. I never wanted war with Silver Mist. I wanted an alliance. But Torin is too proud to ask for help. He would rather steal than beg. He would rather risk his sister than his pride. He tapped the map. Take it. It's yours. The trade routes are open. My grain wagons are already loaded. I stared at the map, then at the man I had been taught to fear. He wasn't a monster. He was a king who had let a spy into his heart because he saw her worth when her own family only saw a tool. You're feeding them? I asked, tears pricking my eyes. After I broke into your home? After I tried to deceive you? They are your family, Riker shrugged, as if it were the simplest thing in the world, which makes them my burden now. He stood up and offered me his hand. Get dressed, my queen. We are going to the border. It is time we had a conversation with your brother. I looked at his hand. It was the hand that had pinned me to the door, the hand that had claimed me with such ferocity. And now, the hand that was offering salvation to everyone I loved. Chapter 9, The Return. We didn't sneak back to the border, we marched. I rode in a carriage of black iron and velvet, flanked by 50 of Riker's Crimson Rock elites. Behind us rumbled 10 heavy wagons, weighed down with sacks of grain, smoked meat, and crates of medicine. King Riker rode a massive black warhorse beside my window. He wasn't hiding. He was projecting his aura so strongly that the birds in the trees went silent as we passed. As we reached the bridge that separated our territories, I saw them. Alpha Tauren stood at the center of the bridge, flanked by a dozen of his own starving guards. He looked like a ghost. His face was gaunt, his eyes wild with lack of sleep. When he saw the Crimson Rock banners, he drew his sword, his hands shaking. "Hold!" Tauren screamed, his voice cracking. "You will not cross!" The caravan stopped. Riker dismounted. He didn't draw a weapon. He walked to the carriage door and opened it, offering me his hand. "Ready?" he asked softly. I took a deep breath. I wasn't the girl in the gray tunic anymore. I was wearing a gown of deep crimson silk, a heavy fur cloak on my shoulders, and the scent of the Alpha King wrapped around me like armor. "Ready," I whispered. I stepped out. Tauren's eyes widened. He dropped his sword. It clattered loudly on the wooden bridge. "Nyla?" he choked out. He ran forward, stopping a few feet away, looking at me as if I were a hallucination. "You're alive. I thought, when you didn't return, I thought he had killed you." He reached for me, but Riker stepped between us. A low, warning growl rumbled in his chest. Tauren froze. His gaze snapped to Riker and then to the healing bite mark on my neck. Horror washed over my brother's face. "You marked her?" Tauren shouted, his fear turning to rage. "You monster! She was a diplomat! She was under protection!" "She was a spy," Riker corrected coldly. "And you sent her to steal from me." "I sent her to save us!" "And you forced yourself on her? You took advantage of a defenseless girl?" "No, Tauren," I said, my voice cutting through the tension. I stepped around Riker. I stood between the two alpha males, one who had sold me for survival, and one who would burn the world to keep me warm. "He didn't force me," I said, meeting my brother's shocked gaze. "He saved me." I pointed to the wagons behind us. "Look," I commanded. Tauren looked. He saw the grain. He saw the medicine crates marked with the Crimson Rock seal. I pulled the scroll from my cloak. "The map," I said. "He gave it to me. He isn't invading, Tauren. He is feeding us." Tauren looked from the wagons to me, and finally to Riker. The fight drained out of him. He slumped, covering his face with his hands. "I don't understand. Why?" Riker stepped up beside me, wrapping a possessive arm around my waist. "Because she is my queen," Riker declared, his voice carrying to every soldier on the bridge. "Your pack is her pack, and I do not let my queen's family starve." Tauren looked at me. For the first time, he didn't see the ghost wolf. He didn't see a weapon or a burden. He saw a woman who had walked into the fire and come out ruling it. "Zola?" Tauren asked, his voice trembling with hope. "Zola." "The medicine is in the first wagon," I said, tears stinging my eyes. "Go to her. Save our sister." Tauren nodded, tears streaming down his face. He looked at Riker, struggling with his pride, before finally bowing his head, not in submission, but in gratitude. "Thank you," he choked out. Riker didn't smile, but he nodded. "Go." As Tauren turned to lead the wagons toward the village, I leaned into Riker's side. "You did good," I whispered. Riker kissed the top of my head. "I didn't do anything, Nyla. You saved them. You were the bridge." Chapter 10. The Queen of Two-Packs. The fever broke 3 days later. I sat by Zola's bedside in the Alpha's manor, holding her small, clammy hand. Her breathing, which had been a terrifying rattle for months, had smoothed into a steady, peaceful rhythm. The crimson medicine Riker's healers had brought was potent. It hadn't just saved her life, it had given her back her color. "Nyla?" Zola whispered, her eyelids fluttering open. "I'm here," I said, squeezing her hand, tears of relief burning my eyes. "I'm right here, Zoe." "You look different," she murmured, squinting at me. "You look shiny." I smiled. It wasn't just the silk dress and the gold rings Riker insisted I wear. It was the bond. The mating mark on my neck hummed with a constant, low-level warmth that fed my soul. I wasn't the ghost anymore. I was tethered to the most powerful force on the continent, and through him, I had found my own substance. The door creaked open. Torin stood there. He looked cleaner, fed, but humble. The arrogance that had driven me to almost sacrifice me was gone, replaced with a quiet shame. "She's sleeping," I whispered, standing up. We walked out onto the balcony overlooking the village. Smoke curled from chimneys. Smoke from cooking fires, not desperation. The smell of baking bread filled the air. The wagons had done their work. The Silver Mist Pack was eating. "You saved us," Torin said quietly, leaning against the railing. He didn't look at me. He looked at the bustling village. "I sent you away to steal scraps, and you came back with a kingdom." "I didn't do it for you," I said, honestly. "I did it for Zola, and for them." I gestured to the pack below. "I know," Torin sighed. He turned to me, his expression pained. "I told myself I was being a strong alpha, that sacrificing one for the many was the right choice. But looking at you now, seeing how he looks at you, I shook my head. I was just a coward, Nyla. I was afraid to lose control, so I sold my own sister." "You were desperate," I said. I wasn't ready to fully forgive him, but the anger had drained away, replaced with a weary understanding. "But things are different now. We are allies, Torin, not just siblings. Riker has opened the routes, but I will be the one overseeing the trade. You answer to me now, as much as you answer to him." Torin straightened. He looked at the mark on my neck, then looked me in the eye. He bowed his head. "Yes, my queen." A heavy, warm hand landed on my waist. I didn't need to look to know who it was. My body hummed in recognition. King Riker stepped up behind me, pulling me back against his chest. He was a solid wall of heat and protection. He nodded at Torin, a silent acknowledgement of the new hierarchy, before burying his face in my hair. "Ready to go home?" murmured Riker against my ear. Home. I looked at the Silver Mist lands, the place where I was born, where I was invisible, where I was a ghost. Then I leaned back into the man who had locked a door, trapped me, and forced me to see my own worth. "Yes," I whispered. We walked down to the carriage, and the Silver Mist Pack had gathered to watch us leave. They didn't look through me anymore. They bowed, they cheered. They saw the ghost wolf who had returned as a savior. As the carriage rolled away toward the Crimson Rock Mountains, Riker pulled me into his lap. The space was cramped, intimate, and perfect. He teased me. "You're thinking too loud," tracing the line of my jaw. "I was just thinking about the suppressants," I admitted, resting my head on his shoulder. "I took them to hide from you, to make sure you never noticed me." Riker laughed, a low rumble that vibrated through my chest. "Nyla, you could have bathed in scent blockers. You could have worn a mask. It wouldn't have mattered." He kissed my mating mark, sending a shiver of pleasure down my spine. "My soul knew your soul the moment you walked into the war room. The heat, that was just your body catching up to what the fates had already decided." He lifted my chin, his amber eyes burning with that familiar, possessive fire that I now knew was love. "You were never a ghost, Nyla. You were just waiting for the one person who knew how to see you." I smiled, tangling my fingers in his hair, pulling him down for a kiss that tasted of cedar, rain, and forever. "I see you, Riker," I whispered against his lips. "I see you." The end.